Hi, my name is James A. Jordan. I'm a quick bio about me. I'm a PhD student at Georgia State University. I'm getting my PhD in creative writing. But before that, I was actually at the University of New Orleans, where I studied under our guest today, M.O. Walsh, or Neil, as I'll be calling him. And just a quick bio on Neil. Neil's writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, Oxford American, the Southern Review, and the Best American New Voices, among other places. The Prospect of Magic, his debut collection, won the Tart Fiction Prize. His novel, My Sunshine Away, was a New York Times bestseller and winner of the Pat Conroy Southern Book Prize. He's a graduate of the MFA program at the University of Mississippi and currently directs the creative writing workshop at the University of New Orleans. He plays a mean guitar, and he's the first person I ever heard play John Prine. And today we're here talking about his new book, The Big Door Prize, whose title comes from a John Prine song. Thanks, Neil.
That's right. Well, thank you, Drew. And so, he'll be calling me Neil because my middle name is O'Neill. I'll be calling him Drew because his middle name is Andrew. And we go way back. I don't know, probably about 6 years at this point, huh?
Almost 7.
Almost 7 years, right?
Got that 7-year.
So, yes, so I can remember very well when Drew first became a student at University of New Orleans. And, it's one of the great things about jobs like mine where you get to teach people who are serious about fiction writing is that you quickly learn as much from them as they do from you. And we trade books back and forth and stories. And it's been a good relationship, man. Which I still enjoy. But yeah, anyway, so thanks for doing this, Drew.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to do it also. I'm thinking maybe we'll start with you just sort of talking a little bit about the Big Door Prize for people who maybe haven't read it.
Okay. So it's a novel that came out in September. I worked on it for probably about 4 years, but I had the idea for it almost almost 20 years ago. It was when I was in graduate school. And I initially wrote it as a short story. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, maybe that process later. But it's something an idea I've been kicking around for a long time. And so I was very excited to get it out. It's, as Drew said, the title comes from a John Prine lyric. We can talk about his sort of influence on the book and on my brain later if you want to. But I think what I'll do is just tell you real quickly a little bit about the book. And Drew said he wants me to read from it, so I'll read quickly from it as well. But it's, maybe what I'll do is I just read the very opening introduction, which is, I think, going to set up the premise, right? And then I'll tell you a little bit about what happens after that. But anyway, so the Big Door Prize. It starts out, the first chapter just is this question. Question. How can you know that your whole life will change on a day the sun rises at the agreed upon time by science or God or what have you, and the morning birds go about their usual bouncing for worms? How can you know? And why would you think there's another life for you, perhaps another possibility inside of you already, when the walk that you take each dawn is so lovely and safe, when the roads are all paved and the sidewalks just swept, and those who move along them, like you, seem so content to retread the worn path that they've made? Why would you think it? After all, this is only Deerfield, a town so simple it is named for what you might see and where you might see it. It is a place where storefronts hang flowering baskets, where the rocking chairs gently set on friendly porches look fit for rocking gently in the friendly people who own them, as they rock gently their friendly parents before them. And such quiet on a morning like this one, such quiet on every stormless morning in Deerfield, that the only sound above you is the rustle of venturing squirrels in the branches. Maybe to your side, the huff of a familiar dog at a familiar fence line who muzzles your hand as you pass. And if this were not enough to comfort you, not enough to seduce you into believing that today is just another in the easy procession of days you began so long ago, the first words you hear spoken on this morning are the first words you hear spoken on most mornings, from the manager at the grocery store you walk to for coffee who says, "Good day," to whom you reply, "Isn't it though?" So how could you know? Perhaps you might know on this particular morning in Deerfield, in this small part of South Louisiana, because you see something new at the store. It is a simple looking machine sitting next to the customer service desk. It is large enough to enter through curtains as one would a photo booth at the mall or parish fair, and it promises to tell you your potential in life, what your body and mind are capable of doing based on the science of DNA. Some people in town have already tried this machine you've heard, and to surprising result. A neighbor opened up a new business after getting her readout. An old friend quit pills and got clean. Another person you know left town entirely, off on some long dreamt of vacation they never would have booked before. This kind of talk is enough to make you curious, to make anyone curious, the way word of a simple and miraculous new diet might do, and it costs only $2 to try. Today, tucked safely in your pocket, you have exactly $2. And you, tucked safely into your life, haven't much else to do. So you draw back the curtains and enter the booth. You give it your money. The screen brightens. You read a message that instructs you to take one of the Q-tips provided, to remove the plastic and gently swab the inside of your cheek, and so you do this as well, and why not? No one can see you. What would anyone care? You then deposit this into the slot as directed and can't help but grin at the disclaimer, which reads that there is a 1% margin of error in a pursuit like this, and that the company, Dynamics, is not liable for any stress your new potential may cause. Yet still, you carry on. You wait for the result. But why? That is the question. Perhaps it is because people like you, people like us, when we are joking, say, well, what's the worst that could happen? But when we are honest and when we are alone, we wonder, what is the best? And so that's sort of the introduction, for the opening question to the book. And what you find out is that you're in this small town, like it says, and this machine has shown up at the local grocery store that everyone sort of goes to, that says for $2 and a swab of your DNA, it can tell you sort of what your potential in life was, right? You know, and this could be any range from anything to a Olympic figure skater to a tax attorney to a you know, anything. I mean, it spits out these little blue tickets, usually with just like one word on them that tell people what they would have been best at. And so people, you know, oddly enough, start trying it at the beginning of the novel, and some people it really clicks. This one early character gets one that says entrepreneur, and they go and they open up a little snowball stand, and next thing you know, it's got a line around the block, so the people in you know, people in town start getting curious about it. And the real, you know, the novel's got several sort of, it's got like really 4 main characters, but it's hopefully a fully populated novel. There's lots of characters, but the main people we follow are a husband and wife who've been married, you know, for about 15 years, love each other very much, earnestly, you know, have had a good life, and they both get very different readouts from this machine, right? So they get sent sort of in different directions by what their future might look like, what their potential could be, and that's sort of the driving force of the novel. But hopefully it's a funny novel. You know, hopefully it's also got some suspense and things like that. But I hope that it's a type of thing that'll make, you know, people smile as they read it. That was part of the goal.
Yeah, I guess maybe a good place to start. And one thing that I noticed was just how sort of tonally, in some ways, different this novel is from My Sunshine Away.
Yeah.
Both in terms of like the openings set up 2 very different types of stories.
Right.
And I'm curious what that process was like for you writing something like this versus, if you can remember, kind of when you first started writing My Sunshine Away.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, very clearly, honestly, and I tried to structure the sort of beginnings in similar ways. Where, you know, one thing I noticed with My Sunshine Away was it was you know, it starts with a very sort of short chapter like that too, that sort of introduces the problem. Well, the problem in My Sunshine Away is a sexual assault. It's a rape. You know, in the very first opening pages. So that's obviously going to set a different tone, you know, and it's a darker, more sort of brooding novel. I mean, hopefully it has moments of light too, but it's more serious subject matter. And so, but what I noticed was, man, it was really handy to have like a 5-minute opening chapter, because anytime I went to read or do something like this, I was like, well, I can sort of give people a sort of a snapshot kind of the whole book really quickly and hopefully efficiently, you know. And so I try to do something similar here, you know, the idea of opening up with a question. I mean, this is a book that has lots of questions in it because it's people really wondering about their lives, wondering if they made the right decision or if they perhaps should go pursue this new vision of themselves that they never even considered. It's a book full of questions, right? And so, yeah, I did think about it. Well, how does that one open? How can I open this one that's going to sort of set a different tone, right? And yeah, tonally, I hope this thing is different because, you know, I worked on My Sunshine Away for like 7 years, and it was, you know, sort of an intense place to be for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of tough stuff that you have to deal with in that novel. And so, you know, I like to be I mean, I think I'm a sort of happy person, you know what I'm saying? I like to have a good time with people and smile and stuff. And so, you know, I'm like this. And then every time I went to work, it had to be, you know, sort of real serious as the subject matter sort of dictated. And so after that, you know, after that book came out and I was looking for something new to work on, I was very much looking for a different mental space to be in. You know, I was like, what if I can go to work and like crack jokes, you know, and laugh, and how might that be different than that last sort of 7-year project I had, you know? And this was really fun. I mean, you know, I think there's serious stuff in this book. I mean, I hope that it offers the same sort of emotional weight as anything else I've ever written or anything else that people find worthy of reading. But I surely had a really good time writing it.
Why do you think there's such a? It seems like there's such a resistance to being funny sometimes in fiction. Like there seems to be more of the movement towards. I mean, I find myself when I'm writing, I steer more towards serious. Though I think in person I'm more kind of gregarious and funny. I hope so, at least.
Let's see some of it, Drew. What you got right now?
No, I don't have any jokes on me.
Yeah, I think I thought about that a lot, actually. But, you know, there's a couple of reasons for it, I think, and I can't answer for everybody. I can just answer for me.
Sure.
Well, first of all, you know, it's what you're sort of trained to consider literary, you know, and, you know, when I look back at my high school, college, graduate school education, it was all serious stuff, man. You know, it's like it had to be serious in order for it to be in that classroom. And so I think that as a writer, you know, when I was just starting out as a young writer, I was like, well, what do I have to do to get in the classroom? You know, like I wanted my books taught, right? I wanted to, like, you know, I don't know if that sounds narcissistic or not, but anyone that says that's not true is probably lying, right? I mean, one of the reasons that we're so attracted to this idea of writing and publishing is because we want to pay back that sort of feeling that other writers gave us. And oftentimes that happens in a classroom, right? So I was very interested in, like, oh, well, what Faulkner did to my brain. Well, if I want to do that to someone else's brain, I sure as hell have to be serious, right? Because he's not, you know, doing a lot of armpit, you know, noise jokes or anything. You know, he's pretty serious. And so I think that's part of it. And so we're sort of trained that way. And I'm like you, to where I was always looking for serious stuff, even for my own reading pleasure. So even once it got out of the classroom, I still think I was sort of like, it was like my brain was wired to a way that if I walked into, like, you know, Garden District Books or Square Books or a bookstore, it was like I just sort of scanned, you know, like Terminator style, looking for high literary fiction, you know, the serious stuff that was, you know, a National Book Award finalist, or, you know, it had to have sort of like tattoos all over it, you know, that suggested, you know, I'm a mean character, right? But then what happened is I remember very clearly reading The End of Vandalism by Tom Drury, and this is probably maybe 8 years ago or so that I finally read this. And it was on the recommendation of Michael Knight, who's one of my old teachers, and Matt Brock, one of my good friends, who were both like, dude, you got to read this book. And I found it hilarious. And it's so well written. It's like, you know, but also I just found myself loving being with the characters and listening to them talk, you know, and sort of observe. And I was just laughing. And I was like, man, I love that, you know. And then I remembered that my wife had given me many years ago, Straight Man by Richard Russo to read, and I never read it. You know, it was sweet of her to give me a book, but I was like, this has got a picture of a duck. It's looks kind of silly. I was like, you know what? I really like the Individualism. Maybe I'll try another funny book. And I thought that it was so good, man. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I read what was the Throwback Special, right? And I started trying to find books that were funny, right? And I don't mean Confederacy of Dunces like over the top lampoon, satirical funny. I just mean no, it's like the situations are funny, the people are funny. It wants you to laugh, you know? And I found so much pleasure in reading it that I had to ask myself, well, why the hell am I avoiding writing things that I like to read? But Drew, think about how long writers do this. I mean, you know, they feel like they have to write a certain type of book or be a certain type of writer without spending a lot of time thinking about, well, what kind of reader am I? Like, what do I like to read and why? And so that's sort of, once it clicked to me, like, oh, I actually really get a lot of pleasure out of this. That's when I sort of gave myself the freedom to write a book that I hoped people would laugh, you know, as they're reading it. That was really it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I find that I have to constantly kind of get out of my head in terms of like worrying about what kind of writer am I going to come across as,
right?
And remind myself that currently I come across as no writer, so it doesn't really matter. I can do whatever I want to.
That's not true.
But you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if did you feel that way before your first book? Like, how am I going to be seen when My Sunshine Away comes out?
Yeah, no, I don't think it was, at least to me, it wasn't that way, because I'd published a book of stories first. And so when you think about that, I think with your first book, you're just hoping anyone will take it. You know, you're just like, oh gosh, you know, I just hope this book gets out in the world. But of course you have that, you know, hopefully it's your love. I mean, it's what you've been working on. And it's the best version of you. That's what all of our books are, you know? And so that book has a lot of magical realism, a lot of weird stuff. There's like bad people having sex with each other. And you know, it's a crazy book. There you go. And so I was really proud of that, but I was like, okay, so I've done that. What do I do now? And so, you know, I think that with each, you know, so I have 3 books, which doesn't sound like a lot, but to me is more than I ever thought I would do in my life. So it's you know, new territory. But I think with each book, I kind of want to try something new, you know, challenge myself in some new way, in the way that you might do with each story that you write. It's like, you know, I've read a good amount of your stories, and I know you're trying different forms, you're trying different sort of characters. You know, you're constantly trying to challenge yourself. And so with My Sunshine Away being sort of serious and had that, you know, if anyone could ever say that I got a reputation, it would be from that book, but I don't know if that's true or not. But I think the reputation was then, okay, serious Southern literature, right? Well, did I think, you know, okay, well, how do I, you know, what are people going to think if I do this other thing next? Not really. What I was thinking is, okay, I've done Southern serious, you know, can I do something different tonally that's going to excite me? And I remember very well, I've got a great editor named Sally Kim at Putnam. And I remember talking to her about this book and saying, look, I've started working on this book that is nothing like My Sunshine Away. Like, I'm sorry, if that's a problem, then we're going to have a problem because it doesn't start with a crime. It's not serious. It's not, I mean, it's serious, but it's tonally very different. And, you know, I was like, it's what I want to do right now. And this is the mark of, I think, most great editors is she didn't tell me, no, we really want another book like your first one. She said, well, no, what we want you to do is have fun, right? I mean, if you're enjoying yourself, the work's going to be good. And I think, I mean, I hope that's true because I just love this book. It's one of the ones that, one of the things I sort of miss working on, you know, like I liked being in this place so much.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned this, and I want to bring it back up, that the origins of this book come from a story from The Prospect of Magic.
Right.
And so I'm curious about that process of both returning to something after so long. I mean, essentially it had been 15 years since writing it when you started, you kind of get back into it. So what was that process like, kind of going back and looking at those characters from a perspective of someone who had grown so much as a writer since then?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, Well, I think that first of all, the thing that's strange about it is that most times, and again, I can only speak for myself, but if I finish a story and it's lucky enough to be published somewhere, I really don't think much about that story anymore. I mean, it becomes to me sort of an artifact. It's like, okay, that's cool. I remember writing that story. I remember where I was mentally. I'm glad that worked out, but it's gone, right? It's done. And this was just one of those ones that sort of never felt that way. It always felt, well, God, there's something more I could do. And I think honestly, it's just because the premise is felt to me just so full of potential. Like just it. I mean, it's literally like a story generating machine. You have someone in a certain phase of their life. They walk into this booth, they give it $2, and it spits out something to them that could totally change that direction. And that's what all stories are. Like we have a character going in one path, something comes in, disrupts it, and what are they going to do from there, right? How are they going to meet this challenge or deal with this conflict? And so it was that idea. Is like, man, there's so many more stories I could tell with this machine. Like maybe I'll think about that as a novel. And so yeah, then going back to the story, I recognized the thing I really loved about it was I love this couple. This at the heart of it, they're just two people that love each other. And you know me well enough. Anyone that's patient enough to be watching this right now may not know me at all, but I am one of these people that absolutely full on believes that like love is real and people can actually be really kind to each other, and not everyone has an ulterior motive, and not every man's trying to destroy a woman, not every partner is trying to destroy their partner. I believe these things, right? It might just be because I've been very lucky to be surrounded by positive relationships all my life, but I believe these things. And so I'm like, I went back to the story. I'm like, oh yes, I love this couple. And so I just went back to it and started, thinking about, okay, well, how can I expand it? And I know I've told you this before, but like I heard there were Katie Simpson Smith and Taylor Brown were given a reading one time at UNO. We had them as visiting writers, and they're both just very brilliant people and great writers. And both of their novels had been expansions of short stories they had done before. And I remember in the reading so clearly because I was starting to think about doing this myself. And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, all you got to do is go back and add water to it. Just like when you expand a recipe. Just go back and just triple it or whatever." Well, that did not work at all for me. Like when I went back and I was like, "Oh, I just got to sort of expand it," because I quickly found myself just sort of overwhelmed with new character ideas or new, so it was like, it wasn't just a matter of like, okay, I just take this one story and make it a little bigger. It was like, how in the world do I contain this now? And so that was when you're making fundamental decisions about, okay, well, I've got this DNA machine. Do I keep it in small town Deerfield? Do I move it to New York City? Do I keep it on one married couple? Do I have 20 characters, main characters? I mean, you have to start making all these decisions early on in the novel process. And a lot of it you're exploring and you're writing a lot of dead ends that'll never go anywhere, but you're just trying to figure out what you want. And for me, what I realized was I didn't want it to only be the two characters, but I wanted it to be centered around them. So I started trying to find other characters that could be a part of their universe, right? But each have their own journeys. And then the weird stuff of writing happens, which you know about as well, Drew, is like characters just sort of start talking to you and interesting you. And I don't mean talking to you and like, you're waking up in the middle of the night, and you're hearing voices. That happens sometimes. But what I mean is you're like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to go today. Oh, I don't know where I'm going to write today. And the next thing you know, it's like an hour and a half later and you've been writing this character. Where did that come from? Don't know, right? But what happened is a couple characters sort of dominated. There's a high school kid named Jacob in the book. He came to me really early when I started going back as a novel. There's another main character named Father Pete, who also just became, I couldn't stop writing him, and he was sort of based on someone I had seen talk at my church before. And just a really interesting backstory that I had not heard a priest ever have. And so I was like, okay, well, so all of a sudden he was there. And then the next thing you know, 4 years have gone by.
I'm interested. I got two questions. One, I really loved the character of Father Pete so
Thank you.
much. He was probably, his backstory is so rich, and there's such a great heart to his narrative. But I'm curious what, the story was from the perspective of Douglas. It was sort of, he was the main character in that story, but what led to that first decision to have this be four characters? Because the novel is Douglas, his wife Sherilyn, um, Jacob, the high schooler, and Father Peter, really the four main characters that we follow. Do you remember when you decided that shift that this had to be more than just Douglas's story?
Yeah, well, I knew that I couldn't stay locked in that POV because I couldn't do a lot of the storytelling I wanted to do with other characters, right? So Douglas wouldn't have access to them, right? And so then I did what I've been talking about, which is, you challenge yourself and you say, okay, am I going to do something that very possibly will fail miserably? And the answer is, yeah, I'm going to try it because you know what? I can't stand, Drew. I can't stand books that have like multiple, third person close POVs, and I get stuck with a character I don't like, right? And so every third chapter, I know I'm with this character that I don't like, and it drives me crazy. And I don't know if this is like nerdy writer talk or not, but it just means, when every chapter is narrated or is basically just focused on one character, right? And you keep alternating. Well, that's what mine does. And I was like, okay, I've read a lot of books like this that have driven me crazy and that have disappointed me because of it. So can I try it? Can I give it a go? And, I think that is very possible, of course, that there's characters that some people don't like as much as others, but I got it down to the four that I loved writing. And so there was never a character that I was in a third person close to. There's not any character that I did not love writing their chapters. And so hopefully that comes across on the page, but you can't control everything. There's going to be some readers that you just can't, you're never going to talk to, you know what I'm saying? That's fine. But I think that readers that are into my story and into this novel, hopefully they'll like all the characters and like being with them because they're all headed to the same place,
What works for me with those four characters is that they all kind of have their own, they're all different enough. But they all, I think, they have a good heart. And I think that's a really important kind of thing that helps move it along.
Well, and there's something else, Drew, that helps move it along as plot.
There's
right?
plot too, yeah. Well, but what I was going to say is, I also don't like it when you are stuck with one of those multiple character stories, point of view novels, and you have one of those, like, there's a big moment that's about to happen to character A, and then in that chapter, and suddenly we're with character B doing something really mundane.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what works really well in this novel is that you're invested in each person's narrative arc. Their plot is compelling, and I think that's one thing that I noticed working really well here.
Well, I hope so. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, that's what I was going to say is that's one of the tools in our toolbox that, like, we're sitting here talking as if, well, we're just stuck with this character and we're stuck with this voice, but we're forgetting about plot. And that's one way you can make it work is that, so what I try to do is in each chapter, imagine basically that your reader, is with their least favorite character, okay, at that moment. Well, hopefully you can still provide them something in that chapter that's going to remind them or promise them something they're going to see about their favorite character, right? And so I tried to have each chapter, would either make mention or would foreshadow or would somehow connect to the overall plot. So you're always feeling forward momentum. And I know I've talked to you about this in class. That to me is the most important thing about chapter writing. In general, in any novel, and any work that I do, is I'm trying to make sure that one chapter makes the reader want to read the next chapter. That's its only job. Like that's it, right? Well, how do you do that? Well, you make little promises, you put little mini mysteries in there, and what I also think that you do is you try to keep their emotions going up and down, right? You want to. I always, and you know this because I've told you this so many times, but hopefully other people have not heard me say this a million times. I look at it as like a bicycle like what your feet do on the pedals, right? They go up and then they go down, they go up. You do that enough times, next thing you know, you're rolling. Well, I like to end one chapter with on a sort of downbeat, like sort of maybe depressing, or you feel like a downward trajectory. The next one going up, right? Or you're down, and then you start that next character way up here, and so you start feeling the tension between these two characters that are eventually going to come together. Well, you keep going down and up, down and up, down and up, right? Next thing you know, you got a plot that's moving, and that's what I really hope. I mean, I recognize that it's a book with a lot, like I said, a lot of questions, a lot of interiority, some jokes, fun stuff like that. But I do hope at the end of the day, I mean, it's if you're invested, I hope it'd be hard to put down, because there's things you want to find out.
Yeah, I found it a difficult book to put down.
Okay.
But I'm curious, this conversation about chapter structure, did you find this working as well in My Sunshine Away, or is this something that you felt, because My Sunshine Away is a first person novel, and so it's very conversational. It's addressing someone, telling the story. So how does that change with that idea of the chapter ending on that downbeat?
I mean, I don't think it changed at all, because that's where I discovered it, for me. But it was more like emotional highs and lows. Where this one, you can have one character, you recognize. I mean, this is not happening in the novel, but you have one character that's feeling really good, about to walk into the door, of their house to say something, to announce their great mood to their partner, right? And so you have them, and they're reaching for the door, and they're about to go in. So as a reader, you're like, all right, here we go. Well, then if you start that next chapter recognizing that the person on the other side of the door, right, is prepping to tell the one walking in some devastating news, well, that's what I'm talking about. You've already done it. So you've got your high here, you ended it, and then you begin low here, right? And so as the readers go, that's what they're feeling. They're feeling those things coming together. In My Sunshine Away, yeah, you're right, it's first person. So the highs and lows were sort of internal, sort of emotional, what might happen. Maybe a good thing's going to happen, and then the next chapter you recognize that's not true. Well, here I could do it across multiple characters, and you can use dramatic irony when you have multiple characters like this. And in other words, you have one character that is about to do something, and the next character you go to doesn't know they're about to do that, but the reader does, right? And so when the reader has that knowledge that the characters don't have, that makes for really interesting reading, because you're like, oh God, that's when you start rooting, like, please don't do it, you don't understand, he's actually hiding behind the door, but the character doesn't know it. So it's just dramatic irony. And so you can use that when you have sort of four main characters, and that was a lot of fun to play with. What do they know about each other? What do they not? What does the reader know? What does the reader not yet know? That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is a question that you don't want to answer, but I'm always curious when I'm reading novels about, like, what were there parts that you found the most difficult to write,
Right.
or like the part that you looked forward the least to having come back and revise?
I don't know what this one. Not so much. I mean, there were things that were hard to figure out. I mean, plot was hard to figure out, like, and then you ask yourself questions like, am I going to write this scene, or am I going to leave this scene, not touch this scene? How's this going to work out? There's lots of difficult plot stuff, right? And which usually I deal with by just like staring at the ceiling for like, weeks, I mean, there's lots of writing days, that I don't get any writing done. I mean, that's, there's no words, right? But it's puzzling. It's just sort of constantly. That's what a lot of times when you're at the red light and someone's honking at you, you're like, oh God, that's why I didn't press the gas. Is I'm thinking about this damn novel, even though it's 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm not supposed to be writing. That's what I'm doing. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of puzzling. How would this work? Well, what I do, and I'm sure most writers do this, is you just turn it over as many different ways as you can. Like, what if this happened? Okay, well, what if that happened? Well, what if, and you just keep doing that. Well, so that's a lot of the hard stuff, right? But in terms of actual scenes, With this, it was more like, I can't wait to write the scene that I know needs to happen. And like I said, I just had fun, Drew. There's a scene where the main character like finally sort of like gets to like fulfill his dream. He wants to be a trombone player, right? That's his main thing. He wants to be like this great trombonist. And and he finally gets a chance to like actually play music with some real musicians. Well, I knew that I wanted that scene probably like 2 years before I ever wrote it, right? And so I couldn't wait to get to it. So it's kind of the flip side of what you're saying. Like, were there things I was dreading? Well, no, not really dreading, but things that were hard. But there were things I was looking forward to. Yes.
Yeah, that scene that you're talking about is a really excellent moment in the novel. It was one of my favorites. We've talked before about there's also a bar scene in the novel where kind of a number of the main characters come together and really form a friendship kind of through this one night together. And I loved that scene so much. And I think it's worth sort of talking about how that subverts sort of the expectations of what a bar scene in a Southern novel tends to do.
What are they supposed to do, Drew?
Usually it ends up with some blood and mud and beer.
Blood and mud and beer. That's right. Yeah. Broken Jack Daniels bottle. A lot of people, talking about their honor, I guess, and beating each other up. Yeah, no, this was just one that again I knew needed to happen because I had three sort of separate male characters. It's the priest, the main character Douglas, and then Jacob's father, who's the town mayor, who are all just I recognize going through similar sort of things, and I was like, well, that'd be great to sort of get them together somehow, right? And for them to sort of see each other, in a way that I think's happened a lot of times, in my life, not just at the bar, but you meet. And this is a whole different conversation, but we can get into it. But the idea of like male friendship and stereotypical male roles in novels, and I think especially Southern novels, where males just seem to be destructive forces. And I recognize that exists in real life. Of course I do. But the idea, it's just hard for me to find literature where I find men actually having any sort of beneficial relationships to one another, and making friends and depending on these people. And so I was interested in that idea. It's like, there's a line in the book about these three men getting together and having this unexpected nice evening together where they laugh and they joke and they share their troubles and all that type of stuff. And they're drinking. So by the end of the night, everything seems, a little bit more, maybe bigger than it was, right? But having that feeling like if nothing else, for the rest of their lives, right? If they find themselves together somewhere, they're going to be able to remember this night. And in that way, it sort of adds this new scene to their life story that's a positive one. And so little things like this, we just overlook how important that is to humanity and to our lives. It's like, if nothing else, I remember I met you that time and we had a good time. We smiled. And when you see that person 2 years down the road, y'all haven't even talked since, you're going to smile again, right? Because you're going to remember that memory. And so I really wanted to try to create a night like that, where these three men that they don't hang out together all the time. They're not best friends, but they shared something that it's going to make their lives better, right? And so that was it. So that took place in the bar instead of the broken Jack Daniels knife fight.
Yeah, and I think what works so well about that is how it gets woven in sort of afterwards, where they sort of have this loyalty to one another as a result of that night, and that becomes increasingly more clear as the novel progresses, which I really loved and thought that was such a really nice moment to have in the book.
Thanks, man. I mean, and look, I feel the same way about you. We've had several of those moments together over the last, 6 or so years, and that's how people become part of each other's lives, man.
Yeah. I thought a lot about some of the bars that we've hung out in Baton Rouge or New Orleans or Fair Hope.
Fair Hope, yeah.
When I was when I was reading that scene, I was visualizing those bars and thinking very fondly. So that's kind of the interesting thing for me reading this book is knowing you, where when I read Prospect of Magic, we hadn't met yet,
right.
And so it's really interesting to sort of see the story again as this novel, but also reading it from the perspective of knowing you versus when I didn't have a connection to you. That made it kind of uniquely interesting to me.
Well, that's good.
I like both versions.
For people who don't know me, that's a problem. But yes, that's good for you. Thanks,
well,
Drew.
I think it works out really well either way. But it was just it was interesting to kind of be able to picture it that way.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, so another thing, I do hope that, and I don't know how to phrase this, but yeah. So people that have read the book that know me are like, wow, this is like the most like you book I can imagine sort of existing. Right, because of things like that, like you're already talking about, like the way that I sort of view these moments in bars of men making friendships, the way that I sort of view marriages, the totally sort of earnest. It's possible to actually, love someone. In a sort of, it's a very, I hope, a very sardonic book. I mean, it's not, it's not a book that's looking to skewer the idea that people are good. It's not doing that at all. In fact, it's trying to prove that people can be good. And so, there are a lot of people have said, well, this really reminds me of you. And another reason is because of the John Prine stuff. And so, you mentioned that I was the first person who played a John Prine song for you before. It was probably in a hotel room at some point.
Actually in that garage.
Oh, was it in here? Okay. Yeah. It was in this garage that I'm sitting in. Well, yeah. So the story with that is I'd never heard of John Prine either until I was probably like, I was in my early 20s, I guess, when I met Sarah, who's now my wife. I was living in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I always played the drums growing up. But I was living in this small little apartment there with this crazy landlord who lived beneath me, who like he always thought I was having parties, even though like I had no friends and no one ever came over. But he was just convinced I was making too much noise all the time. And so I knew I couldn't have my drums. So I bought like a little acoustic guitar. And so I would I was trying to learn how to play songs. I was terrible because I was trying to learn how to play like Jane's Addiction songs and all this complicated like Led Zeppelin stuff. It was awful, right? And I sounded terrible. And I met Sarah. And finally, like one time, convinced her to come back to my apartment to hang out. And I was like, oh, we can play some music. And I'm trying to play her these songs and it's going poorly, really poorly. I'm not impressing her at all because she's smart. But she was like, well, do you know any John Prine? And I was like, no, I've never even heard of him. She's like, oh, well, it's like one of my dad's favorites. She has this whole backstory with John Prine. So I remember her leaving, and that was like back in the day when I would have to like get on my computer to like Google someone and figure out who they were. I couldn't just like do my phone. And so I went and looked up John Prine. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn a couple songs to impress her, right? And so I did. Learned, 2 or 3 John Prine songs because they're all like only 4 chords. They're so easy to play, which is why he's like such a blessing, to people of limited ability like us, right? And so learned a couple of those. Next time she came over, sure enough, she enjoyed it a little bit more. Well, what happened after that is I recognized that like I actually loved his music in a way that I didn't know was sort of possible. I loved it, yes, because it let me, impress the girl. But then I started listening to more and more and more, and to where I just totally outpaced her in terms of her John Prine fandom, because what I found out is his lyrics to me were unlike any I'd heard before. It took me more than a decade to understand why, but I just knew I loved them. I love the simplicity of the songs. I love the emotion they conveyed and the humor they often had. And then it wasn't until I was, I guess, I knew that I loved his stuff. But when I was working on this book, I, like I said, was enjoying it, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out the plot, all that type of stuff. And then started thinking about what everyone has to think about when they write a novel, which is, okay, why am I doing this more so than just what is the plot? Like, what's connecting this? What's bringing me to it? What's making me want to keep working on it, right? Because that's really, it's like this invisible glue that holds books together. As you know, Drew, it's not just, you can't just wake up and have an idea of like, I want this guy to do this, and that's going to be my book. That doesn't work, man. There's like all this other stuff that has to go into it to motivate you to finish, right? And motivate you for it to be great. And so I started thinking, well, what is it that's, I'm liking about this book? And I would like be listening to John Prine music as I was writing. And then I remember one time there was a scene with the principal of the school that Douglas works. And she gets a readout that says she's supposed to be a carpenter. And I remember I was sitting there working. I sort of made that up. And he was like, he's like, a carpenter. He's like, why in the hell would you want to be a carpenter type of thing? That's not the line. But she says, well, all I know is my grandpa was a carpenter. Da, da, da. And my grandpa was a carpenter is a John Prine song. As soon as I wrote that, I was like, well, I'm doing that as like a little joke to myself, I guess. But that made me sort of think about, okay, well, why do I like John Prine's music so much? What is it? Like sometimes we don't do that. We just like things. We don't sort of examine why we like them. So I started thinking about it more deeply. What is it I love about his stuff? And I recognized it was that he like always like celebrates humanity, right? I mean, he's always on the side of the human heart, right? And that's his team, okay? He is often funny. He's willing to crack a joke, make a pun, anytime, right? But whenever there's something serious going on, he looks it straight in the face, right? I mean, he's got some of the saddest songs you'll ever hear, Sam Stone, Hello in There, all these type of things that are just so sad and earnest. But he also is always just sort of celebrating and willing to talk about our faults and how funny they are and just celebrate the humanity of things. And so when I started thinking about that, I was like, that's like the exact damn thing I want to do with this book. And I recognized, oh my God, I'm like trying to write a John Prine song. I'm like trying to write a 300-page John Prine song. No kidding, man. And like as you know a lot of his stuff now, you can tell me it's pretty true.
Yeah.
And so once I realized that, I was like, oh my God, that's what I'm trying to do. Maybe I should just lean into it, And so that's what I did. And next thing I knew, almost every chapter in the book is now part of a lyric from a John Prine song. There's like another 20 allusions to his stuff in there. There's something, I think when the book came out, I counted, there was like 42 different references to John Prine, John Prine's music in the book, right? A lot of them chapter titles, but other little nods here and there. If you don't know who John Prine is, you're not going to miss a thing. You're not going to even recognize it in the book. If you do know who he is, you're going to find his stuff just like everywhere because he is just such a huge influence. He's my favorite writer, like, period. It doesn't matter if it's, novels, books, songs. He's my favorite. And so I recognized I wanted to do this, and it became a sort of ode, I guess.
Yeah, I think you dedicate the book to John Prine.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of the references really enriching sort of it didn't feel cheap, which I think is a real plus. It
well, I hope not. By God, yeah. Man.
Wouldn't it be nice if that would be the worst thing?
You're just like, well, it felt kind of cheap to me.
It felt pretty cheap here.
Damn.
But I do think that comes across so well in the story, like how that you're sort of, again, like I think when you mentioned about how people say this reads so much like you, people who know you, but I think it comes across just as authentic, like the novel itself does. Even if I didn't know you, right. I feel like it gives a sense of an author kind of celebrating life the way John Prine celebrates life, which is, there are some dark moments in this novel.
Mm-hmm.
But you
it wouldn't be real life without him, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I think back on My Sunshine Away, I also think about those same moments. that really kind of resonate and feel almost like memories. And I think that comes from that sort of deeply human perspective. So it's interesting that you're sort of talking about John Prine that way, because that's the way that I read so much of your work.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I mean, and it's, as you know, just through like lots of practice and lots of failing, and then, hopefully a little success, and then failing and a little success. And I don't mean that in terms of like book by book. I mean, in terms of paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, we're always just trying to figure out, okay, what can we do? What feels right? And this was just it was a book to me that felt right. It felt like, in another thing too, you don't want to spend too much time thinking about this, but you don't want to, you do want to think, am I writing a book that people have read a million times before or not? And I was hopeful that it wasn't. I don't, more, you probably know more about Southern literature than I do, Drew. I don't think this one is really out there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if this book exists other than between these covers, right? And so I was excited about that idea. I was reading a Southern novel. I was writing a Southern novel that I had not read before, which can be tough to do, because sometimes we get, I think Southern writers can get a little redundant, so I was trying to write something that I hadn't read.
Yeah, and kind of getting sort of, I like that idea, because I do agree with you. It feels really fresh in sort of the Southern genre. In a positive way. So I think we're just about out of time, because I know you've got to go make risotto. But I do want to ask one last.
It's about people that are watching this right now and don't recognize that it's Valentine's Day when we're recording this. And so my wife of 16 years, my wife of 16
people
years,
think like, man, he just really has to go make risotto for some reason.
Yeah, my wife of 16 years, who I adore, is on the other side of that garage door, and I'm hoping to make her dinner tonight.
I did have one final question.
Yeah.
Would you take the DNA swab to find out what your potential would?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. I mean, would I do it right now? That's what I have to think of. Okay, so at what point? And this was part of the fun of writing the book. At what point in your life does that answer change? Right. Okay. So when I was in high school, hell yeah, I would have. Probably even my early 20s, hell yeah, I would have. I would want to know what's out there for me, because at this point I can go attack it. I can go really work and try to make that happen if that's what I'm going to be best at and it's going to fulfill me, type of thing. At this point, honestly, like I like my life so much, I'd be terrified of it. Not that it would change, not that I would have to change, right? I get that. But once that seed sort of planted, it's possible that it grows. And I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to even know right now. I just want to hope that it would say what I already am.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I would take it either.
And why not?
Well, I think there's also the fear of like, have you passed by that opportunity? There's some of the characters who like, get professional athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're, of a certain age, like
right.
That's definitely out of the question. I guess unless you want to be a golfer. So that would make me even more depressed.
Right. Yeah, well, that was what was so fun, playing with the ideas. Like, what I mean, just think of the time. Slide characters back and forth, and then get, if you give someone, like you're saying, swimmer or something, when they're 60 and as compared to when they're 60, it's the same word, but it's two totally different sort of emotional reactions to it. And so figuring that out, and I think what I got really interested in the novel was, what if someone finds out that they've done it, right? That they've done their best. That to me became the most sort of interesting possibility, because none of us want to think that we've done our best. We all want to think that there's something else out there for, like it's like, oh no, yeah, I'm doing okay, but like, oh, I'm gonna do this. If you were told like, oh man, no, actually, this is it. This is the best that you could ever do. Every decision you've ever made in your life has been the right one. It has led you to this. This is the best it gets. That would be tough, man.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah. So that was what really got me interested. You know, there's just so many possibilities, but that one is in the book.
Yeah, that one is in the book.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think that's the end of this part.
Okay.
So maybe
All right, man. Well, Drew, thank you so much for doing this. And
yeah, Neil, that's fun.
You know, New Orleans misses you, and I miss you. You need to get back down here.